And welcome to Local Edition on Time Warner Cable. This is the Sacramento Report. I'm Steve Swat. My guest this segment is Bob Huff, who's the Senate Republican leader at the Capitol. Thank you very much for being with us.
Great to be here, Steve. I
guess we are still seeing fallout from, and I guess it's a scandal, of the hidden $54 million in state parks and rec at a time, of course, when the governor has originally had suggested we close 70 of our state parks, and they were looking for some money.
Yeah, and I think it's going to continue to have fallout because when you have government with pockets of unknown money, obviously at a time where we've been cutting back programs, and it's very visible in the parks because, for a relatively small budget amount, they were trying to shut 70 parks because it's very visual. It underscores to the people that there's a lot more going on up here than what they know, and money doesn't seem to be the problem.
And this seems to have all sorts of ramifications. I mean, politically, of course, because it could affect tax measure on the ballot in the fall, and we'll get to that in a second. But also, you've had some house cleaning at Department of Parks and Rec, and I guess maybe that house cleaning isn't complete yet.
It's still unfolding, right? There's evidently an investigation going on, probably multiple investigations going on, trying to figure out who knew what when. And that's when the damaging stuff comes out, when you start seeing a pattern of knowledge and yet not bringing it to light, particularly by those that should have been bringing it to light earlier on.
From what you see, has the governor taken the right approach?
Well, what is the right approach? And when did he know, for that matter? We've got a witness saying the Attorney General has known since the beginning of the year. Well, if that's the case, that's pretty damaging to her, because what in the world has she been doing in the meantime? Because you've had a budget developed, you've had threats of cuts, you've got this whole thing about if we don't get taxes in the fall, the world will come to an end as we know it. So there's a lot of implications as well when somebody that high is not coming forward with knowledge that they have, that they know about.
Let's talk about the fall tax measure, and the governor's tax measure in particular. Temporary sales and income taxes for a few years, bring in some money, obviously to sort of backfill some schools and higher education in K through 12. If you read a lot of letters to the editor and online comments, some of the folks out there maybe predisposed to vote against it anyway have said, because of this scandal hiding the money, you're not going to get my vote.
Right. Well, I think there's a lot of that goes on because it's like we, as elected officials, we have a certain trust with the electorate. Now, it's a fragile thing, and at any given time they're angry at us for a lot of reasons, but when it's framed that we have to cut education, we have to close parks unless you do this, and then all of a sudden you find what they were saying wasn't so, it takes the very bedrock of credibility, if there was any, or whatever level there was, away from the elected officials, and sadly we're all in that. And then why would they trust, a temporary tax, so-called temporary tax of 7 years? They're just not going to do that.
And yet we are, to be frank, we're talking about $54 million, and in terms of the statewide need for money and what's going to have to be cut, you're talking $5+ billion.
Well, it's estimated that, there's a couple of billion laying around in different kinds of funds, and keeping in mind the state has shifted from general fund revenues to where we're running about 40% special fund now because we can't do it through the general fund, and the state just takes that money and sweeps it in to take care of paying for the government that they want to have. So we've grown the scope of overall government since the recession began, but you have to look to the special funds for that. The narrative from the general fund is that we've made all these cuts.
Well, that's another subject, another interview, but that's fascinating, and thank you, Senator Huff, for coming by and talking about this important issue. We appreciate it. And thanks to our viewers for watching Local Edition on Time Warner Cable. A reminder, you can see this and other interviews on My Government On Demand, also YouTube. I'm Steve Swat. Have a great day.